Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide as we travel to a distant castle tucked in the mountains, where we will follow the story of Ichabod and Tessabel, living their peaceful life in the countryside as their family continues to grow. Before we begin, however, let us take a moment to relax and find comfort in the space that we are in here and now. Close your eyes and allow your body to sink into the mattress underneath you. Feel the relief that washes over you as your muscles unwind more and more, and you sink deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the mattress. Let any stress or tension you are carrying within you melt away as this invitation to rest soothes you. There is nothing for you to do now. No expectations or obligations. You are simply here to let your body recover. And even right in this moment, even before sleep, with your eyes closed and your body curled up between the sheets, you are doing just that. Now, before we join Ichabod, Tessabel, and their lovely children Afia and Amari in the mountains of Europe, let us try and simply transport ourselves there. As you breathe in, try and picture a tree sprouting from your floor. As you breathe out, imagine a gentle breeze blowing through its leaves. Imagine that tree growing taller and taller and taller still with every slow, steady breath that you take. And on your exhale, feel that breeze whisper past you as it tickles the leaves on the tree, sending their earthy fragrance into the night air. Feel the grace and beauty of the tree while it grows as tall as it possibly can, until its leaves are brushing the top of the ceiling. And then savor the feeling of the leaves brushing against you as the tree's branches spread more and more. Perhaps by now you can even hear the sounds of the forest, the stunning, relaxing call of birds tweeting overhead, or perhaps you simply enjoy the sound of the leaves and grass on the forest floor, swaying in the soft gusts of wind, brushing against one another in a beautiful rhythm. Can you smell the fresh mountain air, the scent of pine and cedar trees, the earthy aroma of the forest loam, and the fresh, cinnamony scent of the tree's bark, the soft, gentle scent of the wildflowers as they weave through the forest? Now that we have taken the time to relax, find comfort in the space that we are in, and travel to the mountains, let us begin our story. Tessabel awakened before the sun even crested over the mountain peak just outside her window. Ever since they adopted their children, Her mornings would start early, but she didn't mind. In fact, she loved it. She loved starting her morning when the world was still quiet and calm. She would tiptoe out of bed, then plant a gentle kiss on Ichabod's cheek. Every morning, he would smile as he made his way through whatever dream he was having. Most mornings, Tessabel would step out onto their balcony with a cup of steaming hot tea and watch as the landscape stirred to life around her. But this morning, she had something else in mind. It was the first day of spring, and not only that, but it was the 3rd anniversary of Afia's and Amari's adoption, and that in itself called for a celebration. So, she meandered down over the stairs after peeking into the children's bedroom to make sure they were still asleep. And then she stepped out into the forest. By then, the first rays of light had crested over the mountain peak. This time of day, when the stillness became something full of potential and hope, felt utterly magical to her. She loved watching as the shadows swayed and transformed on the forest floor, turning into a mosaic of colors, oranges and pinks and reds and purples, each hue more stunning than the last. Of course, a sunny morning like this called for a parasol, but Tessabel didn't mind. The land around their castle stretched for miles and miles and miles, and she didn't need to worry about catching strange looks from the townsfolk. Around her, the forest gradually became more and more alive. The birds shrugged off their slumber and began to sing into the morning air as if they were composing a soundtrack just for the purpose of celebrating a brand new day. And truly, it seemed that they, too, thought it was going to be a brilliant day. Soon, Tessabel emerged into a meadow, flourishing with hundreds of wildflowers. It was like a living, moving art piece, rippling in the wind with every breeze that danced over the landscape. She knelt down and gently picked up a bushel of flowers, making sure to take a long, deep breath of their scent. They were daisies, tulips, black-eyed Susans, lupines, a true rainbow of color and a delight of aromas. It was the scent of spring, a season she had waited for quite some time. With the flowers in tow, she made her way back to the house, and, for a moment, she found herself reflecting on her past. It wasn't that long ago that she lived a lonely life, a woman working in a bookstore by herself, without any friends or family to share her life with. And now she had all this: a loving husband that she wouldn't trade for the world, two brilliant, beautiful, intelligent children who made her smile every single day, two children who reminded her what life was really about, two children who showed her what love truly was. And as she stepped into the kitchen, bouquet of wildflowers in hand, she wasn't at all surprised to see those two children already up, trying to maneuver themselves onto the counter with a stack of chairs. Tessabel smirked at Afia, knowing she was the ringleader behind this. She was a fiery girl, quick-witted and stubborn, full of determination. Then there was her brother, Amari, who was the gentler of the two. He was content curling up in the corner of the room with a book, while his sister tried to sneak into forbidden rooms, or climb up on countertops, or race off into the forest to try and find animals to play with. But the greatest part was they were best friends. Different at their cores, they were completely connected by one thing: their love for one another. At night, Tessabel would often find the two inside a blanket fort in their room, telling each other stories and laughing when they were supposed to be asleep. Sometimes Tessabel would shut this down, but most of the time she and Ichabod would sit by the door. Being a vampire came with a lot of advantages, one of them being their incredible hearing. They would sit with their backs against the dark, wine-colored floral wallpaper and listen to their children tell stories to one another. Often, they would hold hands and laugh as they indulged in the brilliant fantasy lands their children could weave in the way they spoke to one another. And every once in a while, they would lock eyes. There was a spark there, the kind of spark only two parents can share, when you really take in for a moment how your life had gotten to this point together, how you've imagined to raise two children with one another, how they're able to whisper stories under the covers of their blanket fort to each other. This journey had made Ichabod fall even more in love with Tessabel. So, when he came downstairs that morning and saw Tessabel dancing in the kitchen with Afia and Amari as they stood on the countertops, he had to take a second to catch his breath. Tessabel looked at the children with such love, such affection, such wonder. He often found himself unable to peel his eyes away from her, desperate to take in every sparkle in her eye, every word she spoke, every movement she made. This morning was one such morning. He leaned in the doorway, watching the kids dance with their mother for quite some time before they even noticed he was there. And then, when they did, they sprinted for their father and threw their arms around him. Now, it was Tessabel's turn to stare. She had always known Ichabod was a man of patience, of intelligence, of kindness and gentleness. But the children had brought that out of him even more. He was so soft with them, so vulnerable, so loving, able to connect with them on a level that was just incredible to watch. Tessabel often felt like her heart was going to burst when she simply looked at Ichabod and the children. Once the dancing was over, Tessabel caught a glimpse of the landscape just outside the window. The sunny morning was short-lived, and now the landscape was gray and mysterious with rainfall. The kids noticed this too, and they immediately scrambled to put their coats on. Ichabod tiptoed behind Tessabel and draped a soft wool shawl over her shoulders, pressing a gentle kiss against her cheek as he did so. "It appears we're going out this morning," he whispered. "It appears so," she replied, taking a second to slide a raincoat over Ichabod's burgundy shirt. This was one of their favorite parts of parenthood, walking outdoors with the kids, observing them as they became absorbed with the wonder of the landscape around them. They weren't attending traditional school yet, but they were learning more and more every single day. And Tessabel and Ichabod were watching it unfold before their very eyes. The forest was entirely different from the one Tessabel had journeyed into just an hour or so before. The forest was stirred awake by those first few rays of sun, but now it was stirring to life in an entirely different way. As the rain traveled down, 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 down from the slate-gray clouds hovering just overhead, the landscape welcomed each droplet with gratitude. The misty air filled with an earthy, homey aroma, the kind of aroma that promises that something beautiful is just around the corner, the kind of aroma that urges you to slow down as you press on, to take pride in the journey you are on, and to allow each and every step of that journey to soothe you. While the kids meandered through the forest, leaping in puddles as they went, Tessabel and Ichabod hung back a little bit, watching them as they went. As always, the couple intertwined their fingers, welcoming the warm touch of one another's skin. No matter how long they were together, no matter how many sleepless nights they had with the kids, that spark, that connection that had brought them together in the first place, was still very much there. Not a second went by where they didn't feel the comforting warmth of their love for one another. They were partners in life, best friends, soulmates, something they knew deep, deep within themselves would never change. When they reached the meadow of flowers, even the children stopped their playing solely to take the sight in. Just a bit ago, the wildflowers had been awash with the colors of the rising sun, and now they were transformed. Dewdrops clung to the colorful petals. The damp, earthy air was perfumed with their scent. The sweetness of the daisies and tulips, the magical aroma of the lupines, the scent and the sight invited them to stay a while, to just enjoy one another's company on this beautifully rainy spring day. So that's exactly what they did. Tessabel and Ichabod sat down at one end of the meadow, underneath the long, flowing tendrils of a willow tree. They laid down a soft, sage-colored wool blanket and leaned their backs against the smooth bark of the tree, exhaling with relief as they slowly sunk into each other's arms and the earth beneath them. From their cozy shelter, they could see the children as they ran and played and laughed in the meadow. Their giggles seemed to dance through the flowers and trees to reach the ears of their parents. Tessabel leaned on Ichabod's shoulder, the smile growing on her face. She placed her hand on his chest, relishing the warmth and the comfort it brought her, and he too was comforted by her touch. With his arm wrapped around Tessabel, he felt completely at peace. In moments like this one, sometimes his mind would drift back to what his life used to be. He thought about the hundreds of years spent alone, hundreds of years where he was wandering the countryside, too afraid to lay down roots anywhere, too afraid to let himself get close to the people around him. Every night, he would sleep in a place that didn't feel like home. He ate every meal by himself. Every time he rested in the shelter of a willow tree was filled with sorrow, one where he was left wondering if he would ever be able to escape his life of solitude. There were so many sleepless nights spent wondering what his purpose was, spent wondering what kind of impact he could ever have on the world. And now, sitting in the field of wildflowers in the springtime, he truly realized what his purpose was and what impact he wanted to have. He wanted to give those beautiful children, his beautiful children, the kind of life that he never had. He wanted to raise them to be moral, to be intelligent, to be compassionate. He wanted them to have so many incredible childhood memories that it would be very hard to narrow down their favorite. I think we should come here every rainy spring day, he said to Tessabel. Decibel smiled at her husband, the familiar warmth of admiration surging through her. "I think that's a brilliant idea," she replied. "The children are having a marvelous time." Not wanting the children's memory to simply be of their parents sitting against a tree, Ichabod gently grabbed Decibel's hand and wandered out into the meadow with her, skipping and hopping towards the children. They glowed at the sight of their parents, delighted to have them join. For the rest of that peaceful rainy day, the family picked wildflowers and lazily meandered through the nearby forest, carrying their freshly picked bouquets. The children sang songs, and Decibel and Ichabod taught their children about the surrounding forest. They talked about the balance of nature, how, in spring, everything blossoms and the world comes alive once more. It was perhaps the most beautiful day they have ever shared together, and that night, as Decibel and Ichabod tucked their tired children into bed, reading a sweet bedtime story to them, they both knew that even better days were to come. And on every rainy day that spring, the family would drop whatever they were doing and travel out into the woods, picking wildflowers and having picnics underneath the branches of that breathtaking willow tree. Somehow, every single day seemed more beautiful than the last, and soon, before they knew it, spring faded into the heat of summer. With the spring wildflowers long gone, they needed a new activity to share with their children, a new activity to shape who they would be for the rest of their lives. And Decibel had just the thing. The storms of summer are vastly different from those of spring. The rain against their skin in the springtime was cool and revitalizing, a rain that helped nourish the earth and stir the world to life. But the rain of summer was something entirely different. The air of the summer storms that swirled overhead was thick and warm. It was lazy, inviting you to just relax and watch the landscape change before your eyes. Things were slower in summer. The gray rain clouds slunk across the sky like honey, slow and sweet and heavy. Often, Decibel and the children would gather underneath the awning of their castle as they waited from the storm to begin its journey across the landscape. They would watch the shadows sweep over the mountain peak and trees, bringing with it that sense of calm and peace that can only be found on a warm, rainy summer afternoon. And then, when the rain finally began to fall from the sky, Ichabod and Decibel would gaze at their children and watch as their faces lit up with delight and wonder. Decibel and Ichabod would take the kids by the hand and lead them deep into the forest, further and further through the rain. Along the way, the kids would giggle and tell stories as they leapt and danced across the moss-coated ground, ducking around the trees while they played. They would crest the hill on the south side of the property, just beyond a grove of birch trees, and they'd emerge before the lake. It was a small lake, completely hidden from the rest of the world, their own private escape. Tessabel and Ichabod had worked hard to build a dock over the water so they could swim with ease, and on nearly every rainy summer day, that's exactly what they would do. As the downpour cooled the air, a mist would rise up and up and up and up off the water, giving the entire lake a magical feel. Against the cool air, the lake felt like warm bath water. The children would splash and play as the rain washed down on them, the drops leaving little ringlets in their wake. It was a classic summer pastime, something that Tessabel did quite often growing up, but Ichabod had missed out on. Now, seeing his own children finding ways to be normal in a world where they were not, it healed pieces of himself that he didn't even know were broken. After about an hour or so, the children would clamber up onto the dock with the help of their mother and father. Tessabel would always wrap a nice, warm, dry towel over their shoulders, a comforting embrace after a long, joyful swim. Then they would retire back to the house to spend their afternoon doing whatever other summer activities piqued the children's interest. Sometimes they would play board games in the greenhouse atrium as they watched the rain trickle down, 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 down over the foggy glass ceiling overhead. Other days, they would race through the rose garden, playing tag as they breathed in the fragrant aroma of the flowers and buzzed through the dewy emerald grass. And rarely, they would be blessed with an afternoon thunderstorm. It quickly became something sacred in the house. They would all gather in the glass greenhouse and curl up in a nest of blankets and pillows. Then, for hours, they would watch the thunderstorm rumble overhead. The flashes of lightning would illuminate the forest surrounding them. The crackles of the thunder would drive them closer into one another's arms. They would count the seconds in between the thunder and giggle when the crack rumbled through the sky. It was the kind of family time that Ichabod and Tessabel had always dreamt of. And soon, those afternoon thunderstorms became more and more prevalent as the warmth of summer slipped away and was replaced by the beauty of fall. This was, without a doubt, the whole family's favorite season. As soon as the colors of autumn swept across the landscape, they knew the best days of the year were just ahead of them. On autumn mornings, they would all step out of the house, cloaked by warm wool sweaters and shiny raincoats. The autumn air was unmistakably fresh and warm and magical, inviting them to wander deeper into the woods and experience the bounty of the season. Without hesitation, they would head straight for the west side of their property, which would lead them down, 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 down a dirt path through the forest. Along the way, they would stop to admire the leaves. Of course, the kids would giggle and beg their parents to make piles out of the fallen leaves. And, without fail, Ichabod and Tessabel would work together to create the biggest, most colorful piles they possibly could. They'd watch, starry-eyed, as Amari and Afia leapt into the leaves, sending them scattering over the forest floor once more. They would stop to look at mushrooms growing at the mossy base of trees and along fallen logs, appreciating the littlest wonders of nature. And, eventually, they would find themselves at their final destination, the apple orchard. The old apple trees stretched across the landscape for as far as the eye could see, their gnarled branches reaching all directions in the cloudy sky. They were like works of art, the sculptures crafted by autumn. Tessabel and Ichabod would help their children into the trees, where they would happily bumble over the branches, looking for the juiciest, most delicious apple that they could find. Sometimes, Ichabod would then help Tessabel into a tree of her own. On occasion, he would slip her a book and encourage her to read up amongst the apples while he tended to the children, and sometimes she would take him up on that. But most of the time, she would watch in admiration as Ichabod caught the apples the children tossed down to him. She would think about how far they had come to reach this point together. She had been a lonely girl in a town full of people who didn't understand her. The only solace she had, the only family that she had, was in the books she cultivated at the store. She thought she would be alone forever, thought she would never discover love, until that fateful day when Ichabod came around. Now, she had a family. She had eternal life, eternal love. She not only got to share a brilliant, unconditional love with her husband, but she got to share it with their children as well. The thought of Ichabod wandering through his life alone pulled at her heartstrings, especially when she saw how much kindness he contributed to the lives of others around him. Once they had piled their wicker baskets full of ripe, juicy apples, they would begin the winding journey through the woods back to their home. Tessabel would swing the basket as she mused on all the different things they could make with their bounty, and when they got home, she would make a different one with the kids and Ichabod every time. Baked apples, apple pie, apple crumble, apple cobbler, all delicious, cinnamony treats that they would then bring down and give out for free at the bookstore where Tessabel used to work. The townspeople loved this time of year for that very reason. They got to delight in the creations of this family, the family that had once been so misunderstood. And when all was said and done, Tessabel couldn't help but notice that the children slept a little sounder on the cool autumn nights. She and Ichabod would tuck them in after reading them a sweet bedtime story. They would kiss their foreheads, and before the door was even closed, the children would be off, wandering through their dreams. One autumn night, Ichabod and Tessabel settled by the crackling fire together after putting the children to bed. For quite some time, they sat in silence. Ichabod slid his hand over Tessabel's, holding her tight with a smile laced on his lips. As they watched the flames before them shimmer and dance, they curled up with one another, breathing a sigh of comfort and relief. They knew that more beautiful days were ahead of them. And then, of course, the enchanted winter days would soon arrive, urging them to step out into the world of white and wander under snow-coated pines, where they would sled down the hills in the backyard and watch their children giggle as they lobbed snowballs through the air and made tiny snow angels. There would be days curled up by the fire with the kids, reading books and singing songs. There would be beautiful days where their children were perfect angels, and there would be challenging days where they were not. But those days didn't scare Ichabod or Tessabel, because no matter what they went through, no matter what challenges arose or long days were to be had, they had each other. They had their family. That night, Ichabod fell asleep first, and for a few minutes, Tessabel wondered what he was dreaming about. She hoped he was dreaming about snowy days in the forest with his kids, or warm, rainy summer days by the lake. She hoped that he was happy and at peace wherever his dreams were taking him. It wasn't long after that her eyes began to grow heavy. She reached out slightly, pulling Ichabod just a bit closer against her body so she could embrace the warmth of his skin and the comfort that his touch brought. And soon she was drifting asleep too, destined for dreams of springtime in meadows of wildflowers, and days picking apples in the colorful apple orchards with her darling family. I hope you have enjoyed this sleep story, and it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please Join me again tomorrow for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.